Why can't we marry?
Ator, we are brother and sister.
I'll talk with our father.
We are talking Ator, the Fighting Eagle from 1982, directed by Joe D'Amato, and this was part one of a 4-movie kind of collection, and probably the most famous out of the Italian kind of Conan the Barbarian rip-offs. This one stars Miles O'Keeffe as Ator, and he was in the first 3 movies, replaced in the 4th one. And it also stars Italian beauty Sabrina Ciani and Laura Gemser as well. And this is actually one of the regarded as one of the kind of the worst films ever made, and it's very silly and very cheesy and everything. But I'll tell you a little secret. I kind of like this movie. I enjoy this one. I saw this film back when I was a kid, back in the VHS days, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I've obviously just watched it again for this review. And I still kind of like it, I'm not going to lie. So what is the story? Well, it focuses on Ator, played by Miles O'Keeffe, who you may know played Tarzan the Ape Man. He was also Dracula in Waxworks. And he is essentially the prophesized warrior who is going to rid this kind of land of 1,000 years of evil, ruled by this kind of Spider King guy. And it's somewhat of a convoluted kind of setup, really, I have to say, but nonetheless. Anyway, his village is raided by these kind of bad guys, and they kidnap his bride, who is also his adopted sister. And he sets off to try and rescue her. Along the way, he meets a kind of mentor figure who kind of reveals to him that he's destined for bigger things and kind of trains him, along with a ally in this kind of Amazon woman fighter played by Sabrina Ciani, and they go off and try and rescue his fiancée slash sister and defeat the bad guys. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's talk about what I think works in this movie. This is going to sound like faint praise, but I'm going to say it. This movie is comprehensible, I would say. You can understand what is going on. As silly and cheesy as what it is, that might sound like faint praise indeed, but there's certain movies that I've watched that are kind of like this, where you're thinking, I don't really get what's happening and who these people are and stuff, including the Ator series. Even though I have to say I personally prefer the Iron Warrior out of this one, if I had to be picky. I would say at least this movie has a silly but comprehensible kind of plot. There you go. I think Ator is quite a kind of a fun character in some ways, because, you know, he's this, very good warrior, etc. But he's actually a little bit of an idiot, it has to be said. Inevitably keeps falling for traps over and over again. He gets out of them and everything, but I don't think it was necessarily on purpose. But he falls for everything every time. It's just kind of like, so he ends up being a bit of an oaf, but still a kind of obviously capable kind of warrior. And despite this movie obviously being a clear Conan rip-off, it still has a little bit of scale on it. Ator has to go through a variety of kind of side missions, including undead knights, blind warriors, Amazon women, to ultimately kind of face off against this giant spider monster at the kind of the end. So there's a bit of variety, and I have to say, in this film. I think it's always nice to see Sabrina Ciani. I have to say, I'm quite a fan of hers, and she's done lots of kind of like exploitation movies. And Laura Gemser is obviously is a bit of a fan favourite as well. And I have to be honest with you, I quite like Miles O'Keeffe. I know he's not the best actor ever, but I think he has a certain kind of stoic kind of like persona that I kind of quite enjoy in his kind of roles where he's played variety of kind of like action heroes and things like this. So I actually do quite enjoy the Miles O'Keeffe character here. Certainly better than the last movie in this series where he didn't play Ator. And yes, it's very, very low budget, but it's still kind of quite fun. And we have these kind of like on location kind of shoots with these kind of like, you know, natural environments and kind of like broken down kind of temples and things like that, which looks pretty good. And the movie has got a little bit of scale in it, I will say. You know, the costuming I think is quite kind of fun. There's a variety of kind of like different armours and weapons and things like this. It's relatively kind of action packed. There's kind of always a kind of a fight, a few you know, a few minutes and every kind of like time after that, really. So I kind of quite enjoyed it. So there you go. Call me a sucker, but I kind of like this film. But let's be real. This has a reputation for a reason, and let's be honest and objective and kind of talk about it. Yes, this movie is incredibly cheap. Yes, the spider monster at the end looks laughably bad. Yes, it has a web which is literally made out of rope, and that's just kind of like a little sample of the kind of the cheapness in this movie. And yes, it has to be said, Miles O'Keefe is not the best actor in the world and is arguably a little bit kind of wooden. I still kind of like him as a kind of an action hero type guy, but it's got to be said, you know, certainly, you know, he's a little bit kind of, you know, a blank expression a lot of the time, you might say, but I still kind of liked him. It has a ridiculous kind of twist. There's a kind of reveal from a character which kind of comes out of nowhere, and I think it's meant to be this big surprise, and it's just silly. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and that's the only thing in this film what I would say you have to really think, what? That seemed like a late thought in the shoot. Let's do that, and it kind of goes against really what has been established prior to that. You know, the choreography isn't brilliant, it must be said. I mean, it's a 1982 quickly produced movie that was made to coincide with Conan. So it wasn't like a long shoot, for example. They got this out pretty quick, as they did with the second movie as well. It's very, very quick turnaround. So yes, shortcuts were taken. It looks cheap. There's some terrible like wigs and things like this. You know, there are some kind of questionable decisions in regards to morality, you might say. Certainly the fact that Ator wants to marry his adopted sister, and he doesn't even know he's adopted when he says this, by the way. So there you go. So yeah, there's some things here that are a little bit kind of like, oof. I know we've had Game of Thrones since then, but there you go. So yeah, it's very kind of silly, very, very cheesy. It looks kind of crappy. But I'm still going to say I think there's some fun to be had. I mean, the effects aren't brilliant. You know, that we have the thing where, you know, they have these disappearing characters that literally they just stop the camera, the actor moves that away, and they start running, so they're kind of disappearing in an instant. Things like this. It's really kind of, it's quite cheesy, but it's still kind of fun. You know, it's a somewhat kind of action-packed movie with, you know, good guys and bad guys, heroic deeds. Monsters, variety and kind of enemies and stuff like that. I think, you know, Miles O'Keefe looks very kind of like, I mean, he looks a little bit like an 80s kind of disco star, admittedly, but he's very buff and everything like that, so he looks like a good physical kind of barbarian and everything. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 10. That might seem very high, because I think it has got entertainment value. If you can accept that this movie is going to be a cheap rip-off of Conan, and it's you know, it has its flaws, I gotta be honest with you, I still kind of enjoyed this movie. It's got a reasonable amount to offer. I'm just gonna say that. So that might be a controversial opinion. 5 out of 10. Yes, 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.